Welcome back to the reality check. It's come to my attention on my 22 short years of life that everyone is living their own reality. And if you're not happy with yours, if you're looking to improve, join with me in today's reality check, where we learn from various perspectives that may shift our own on how to live in this world and how to create the life that we want. Today's topic is governance. And when I say that term, all I'm talking about is the form, the authority that governs our life. Be that a set of morals, our heart, our mind, rationality, empiricism, a gut feeling. Those are all different modes of governance. Today we're meeting a man who flips the script on self-governance. He created a protocol, something that can not only be used for the individual, but that's scalable. A governance protocol that can be used for societies, nations, even as we govern the earth, all to reach a new, a better potential. So let's dive in. Governance is the system by which any entity, individual, group, or system exerts authority, maintains order, makes decisions, and enforces behavior. This is important for you and for me because we can take our life and we can judge it. Are you happy about your life circumstances, your choices, your emotions, your body? Chances are we may be excited and happy about some aspects of our life, but more often than not, we always want improvement. Governance is where our decision making and our behavior stems from. It's not just about laws or rulers, but it's about agency, who and what gets to decide, why that authority is accepted, how those decisions are made and enforced, and the purpose, what the system of those various behaviors aim to produce, preserve, or protect. So these are the four pillars of governance. First, you have the authority, who and what is in charge. For us, is it our mind, our body, some idea of God or deity, or is it data, maybe society and cultural influences? Or have you created an algorithm to run your life? Or is it something you run on instinct, flying by the seat of your pants? Next up is feedback. How does this system evolve? Is it doing a good job at producing its desired result? If yes, how? And if not, how can it improve? The other two variables are constraint and coherence. What limits are in place, and does it fit all together? Now, coming into the Western world, and into a more globalized world, Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." Throughout time, and what we see the effects of is largely that Enlightenment movement of the mind as the ruler. In religion and philosophy, we see the body as a temptation and the mind as virtuous. And so much of our life is trying to control our body, control our impulses, put the mind ahead, thinking that this is the smartest part of us, our consciousness. It's what makes us unique from any other animal, any other creature on the earth. And so our mind largely influences and is the sole and role player of our governance. Let's take a moment to listen to where this all began. This week I was listening to a podcast. It was the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett. And he was interviewing Brian Johnson. And he is known for his anti-aging protocol. He's got some pretty innovative thoughts. And I've been following him for a little while, but I'd never heard this podcast. And to say the least, it shifted my perspective. And so that's why I'm bringing it here on the podcast today. His story, so that you can hear it. And then we'll expand a little bit more. So let's hear it from him.
I came up with this idea that basically the core of it is I can't trust myself to act in my best interest. And it stemmed from depression. I knew my mind was encouraging me to commit suicide on a nonstop basis. And yes, yeah, that's what chronic depression feels like, is you desperately want to commit suicide every moment of every day. You just want relief from the awfulness, and you cannot imagine feeling not depressed. And so I knew that I couldn't trust my mind when it was doing these things. And so then also I had this problem with food where I would feel so depressed and I would feel stressed from the day, from work, with my kids. And so it was my inability to stop myself from overeating every single night and walking myself into an early grave. So then I paired those two things together. I'm like, okay, first of all, my brain's like, hey, why don't you commit suicide? And two, my body's like, why don't you just eat yourself into oblivion? And I couldn't stop myself. And I thought, this is really weird that we humans are the most intelligent species on the planet, yet I'm doing these behaviors that are not in my best interest. This is really weird, and I can't stop it. I'm totally helpless in doing it. And I started piecing together this philosophy of like, okay, this is interesting. We kind of treat planet Earth like we treat our bodies. My behavior is not too dissimilar from what society is doing. And I thought, what is the larger implication of the situation? We humans have a problem of acting in our best interest. Is there an alternative structure of authority that could do a better job? And that's when I really came up with the core of what Blueprint is, which is I said, okay, instead of my mind doing this on a regular basis, I'm going to measure every organ of my body. I'm going to ask it what it needs to be in its best space. So my kidney and liver and heart and lungs, I'm going to take the data, look at scientific evidence, and then create an algorithm. And then I'm going to follow that algorithm perfectly. And so my body is going to call the shots, not my mind. And that was when it all kind of came together with trying to piece together AI. Maybe the revolution is we humans have done a wonderful job to arrive at this point. Maybe it's time for us to pass the reins to other control systems that manage our long-term interests better.
From his experience of 10 years with depression, he flipped this notion of mind and control on its head. He thought, why is my mind in control when my mind is literally telling me to kill myself? It is self-sabotaging. It's maladaptive. And so, of course, it wouldn't make much sense for us to be controlled by our mind if in some ways it is unhelpful. And so Brian Johnson experienced this, had this thought, and he had that serious reflection that I now share with you. If the mind is capable of creating literal hell, why should it be in charge of trying to design heaven on earth? If we're trying to live our best lives, why do we give our mind control of that? And this is something I resonate because I think a lot. And I always take the approach of trying to think out of my problems. And just recently, I've been challenging this. Because the mind is complicated, it's hard to understand. And to some degree, when is enough enough? When do you stop trusting your mind and look somewhere else for your answers? And so Brian Johnson, he had this reflection with himself, and he came to the conclusion that he is not qualified to run this machine. His life is the machine. Our lives are the machine. And if you take his perspective, his approach, he's saying our mind, since it has this potential to self-sabotage, a lot of its coping mechanisms are maladaptive, it shouldn't be in charge. He fires himself, in a way, and he outsources his governance to algorithms, to data, to, in essence, control and direct his life. And so this is Blueprint, what he created, the approach of how we should govern life. That is us individually as human beings, the protocol in which we should take care of our body, but also on a larger scale in nations, and in caring for the earth. That if we are to take that approach, we should take a lot of time to measure the earth, understand its properties, so that we understand what it takes for it to work well, and then we institute a protocol, patterns and regulations, so that it abides by those rules of getting what it needs to thrive. A few things in his model is that he has a strict bedtime. He goes to bed at 8:30 every night. He eats 3 meals, and he doesn't eat beyond 11 a.m. He doesn't give his mind say in the matter. He doesn't give his mind the opportunity to pick from a menu, to order the unhealthy thing. Rather, he uses data over. And when you look at the nitty-gritty details, you may think, oh man, this guy's crazy. Like, what? And that's what I thought initially, the first time I heard about him a year or two ago. I thought, what is this guy doing? But this is what happens if you look too narrow in the trenches. That's why you have to get the context, you have to get the aerial view first to look at the broader picture and understand what is the shift this man's making. And now that you've made that shift and you go back in the details, there's no wonder it's so different than what we're used to over here. Of course, it's dramatically different. And the only reason it's different is because we don't do it. The only reason it's normal to eat unhealthy, to go to bed late, to not take care of our body, is because that's what everyone does. It's not a matter of right and wrong, but it's a matter of normality. And because this is normal, this seems to be absurd, even though, objectively speaking, it's the better way to go. And so I just want to interject and make that point because we can apply that to everything in life. There's a difference between normality and uniqueness and right and wrong. Oftentimes they never align. Just because something is normal doesn't mean it's right. In my experience, most of the time, it's actually the opposite. You have to look at the unique, of course, but you have to understand and try and figure out what is happening beyond that, underneath. And so, yeah, he's completely taken a different direction. He has over 100 daily supplements he takes. He's controlled light exposure, temperature, sleep, and movement. But it's by this quote, he says it in his Blueprint Manifesto, what and when I eat is decided by asking my liver, pancreas, and other organs what they need to function at their best. And so this is an example. What Brian Johnson has done is simply focused on the body. But this approach, it can be applied to everything. How we approach work, relationships, societal governance as a whole. He's replacing the narrative center of the mind with the metabolic center of the body. And he makes the crazy claim. I love that clip. He says, data and algorithms do a better job of loving us than we can. It's like we as humans, we've taken us this far. And we've made it pretty far, but he understands that we're fallible. There will never be a perfect government. There will never be a perfect nation. And with AI, the stakes are higher. And what he understands is that at this point, what would be helpful is recognizing our own peril within us. It's like we have an attraction to self-destruction. And with that in mind, he says, knowing we can't take care of ourselves, and it makes sense he has that point of view because he dealt with depression. He understood that he couldn't take care of himself, and so he had to look elsewhere. And that is what he's advocating for everyone to do. That we can't take care of ourselves, so we have to outsource. And honestly, it makes pretty good sense. There will be those that strive for self-improvement and strive for progress. And I think I'm one of those people. But even then, I don't trust myself. I've implemented 75 hard. I've implemented structure and routine and habits in my life just the last couple months because previous to that, I was really struggling mentally, emotionally, and it reflected in how productive I was throughout the day. In fact, I wasn't productive. And for months, I just tried to think through those problems. I thought if I could understand my mind, what was happening, then I could finally crack the code and just move forward. But I'm here to tell you the solution never came that way. I never figured it out. Rather, I made a decision at one point when I was in a good headspace of what I do. And then that decision was made, I just moved forward. I think you could relate it to the example of self-driving cars. You know, at first, that idea is nuts. Like, man, I would never get in a self-driving car. I feel like I would die. I would much rather put myself behind the wheel to control the outcome. But if you create a good enough self-driving car with all the science, all the math, all the cameras, sensors, everything you need for it to perform really well, man, I'd take that over me any day because I'm fallible. I get distracted. I have impulses. I have emotion that influences how I drive. I can get frustrated and mad. We as humans, because we're fallible, we are inevitably going to self-destruct. That's a crazy thought, but I think it holds some weight. And so, in a few years from now, what I already want, obviously, I don't have a self-driving car. But in a few years, I'd love a self-driving car. And I think maybe in 50 years, the whole world will be self-driving cars. Because you can trust the math, you can trust the science more than you can trust ourselves. Because we're organic. We adapt, we change, we're impressionable. And science is not. So you can contrast these two approaches. The one that I would say is most commonly held by people to trust their instincts and follow the heart, that enjoying life is more important. That I'll stay up late to hang out with my friends, or I'll eat the piece of cake because I'm enjoying life. I'm creating relationships. And there are some pros to that. When you have a mind-led life, there's flexibility, adaptability, creativity. You are in charge. There's more moral agency, autonomy, and free will. But at the same time, we suffer and we struggle because we're prone to delusion, to distortion, to addiction, like Brian Johnson experienced. And so these vulnerabilities, they easily become self-destructive. And you can analyze your life on any given day. Take today. Think back through your decision making, how you chose to spend your time, how you used your body, and just rate it positive or negative. Today I got in the shower, I got in the ice bath, I worked out, I ate food, but then there's negatives. I scrolled on social media, I slept in too late, I ate unhealthy food. That's the balance that we as humans have responsibility. And what Brian argues, and what I could see, is that we will never do a good job at that. We will always fall, at least some of us. The alternative is the body-led life, that we look at our needs, asking ourselves, what does our pancreas need to thrive? What do all of our organs need to thrive? And then create a protocol and patterns to serve those needs. The benefits of these are the fact that you don't have decision fatigue, that decisions, they're already made for you, and you can't negotiate, you can't self-sabotage. And of course, these are all aligned with your higher purpose of what you really want in life. And I would argue that there would be some mental peace that comes from this. When you have systemic order, your will is irrelevant. So I don't have to worry about not failing in a way. The cons, obviously, is that you sacrifice spontaneity. If I go to bed at 8:30 every night, I'll miss a lot of stuff that happens in the world. And outsourcing your agency in a way kind of feels a little bit like it could be scary, because then you are not acting for yourself. And that is a very interesting, dangerous thought that I really haven't considered. But I want you to take a moment to reflect on this, and I think it will make sense. I call it the architect reflection. Now, imagine you are an architect, an engineer, someone that builds a house or builds buildings. If your life was a building, take a house, how would you go about building it? An architect would use precise measurements and math to build the building. You couldn't just rig something together, use random angles, a bunch of nails, and use creativity to build a building. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't be safe. Rather, you have to focus on the structural integrity. You have to be precise about your measurements and angles. You have to be exact on what materials you use to make sure that it's weight bearing and that it won't crumble and fall. And this very much is our lives. We're building our own house every day. We live in a house. And you can see the danger of us trying to build it ourselves, because we don't know how to build a house, really. We don't know the precise measurements. We don't know what materials are structurally sound. And so I would argue that a lot of people, mentally, they're living in crappy houses. They're living in cardboard boxes. Some people's houses have fallen over because they weren't built well. And so Brian Johnson's approach, the blueprint protocol, that is outsourcing your home. It's like as if you were to give it to an architect, someone who knows what he's doing. And then they would be able to come back to you and say, okay, do this and this and this exactly, and that will build you a good home. It relies on the data and algorithms, precise exact measurements, rather than our intuition or our desires, all of which are fallible. And so I analyze this, I look at Brian Johnson's approach, and I look at the alternative of just running by instinct or by rationale, and I see validity in both. Obviously, when you figure out that what you're doing is wrong, it kind of makes you want to jump ship, just go all the way on the other side and live Brian Johnson's life, which kind of honestly intrigues me. It sounds a little bit sad, but like I said, that's just the normality. Because no one does it, it seems to be so different and unique. But if you look at things objectively, I want to be happy, I want to be healthy, and our body has such a profound impact on our happiness and health. And so, objectively, I definitely take his approach because I want the precise measurement, I want the algorithm that uses the math, that uses the science, that is sound and valid, much more than my mind, that fluctuates, that is easily influenced, and honestly self-sabotages all the time. So, now that we've dove into Brian Johnson, let's dive back out, because he was just one example. But like I was saying at the beginning, all this is about is governance. It can be applied to everything in our life. Every person operates under some system. Is it our mind, our body, data, God, or our instinct? Brian Johnson chose to demote his mind and put the data of his body above. Jordan Peterson says too much order is tyranny, too much chaos is death. And that is what I think of, that rather than jumping ship and leaving this altogether, something that has held humanity for so long, but also staying here because now that I know that's bad, I want to change. I look for a hybrid system. What can hold both well? To be able to listen to the data, to outsource what I know I am incapable of making the right decision on, but still include my personality, my intuition, my heart into the house that I build. Because no one wants just 4 walls. It could be a good house, but everyone wants character. They want to add decoration. They want to ornament. And that's how I see a good outcome of this being, that we can outsource the engineering of our life. We can go to someone who understands what it takes to build a good house. In the same way, we could see what it takes to live a good life, how to meet our physical needs. And so we can have our house and be strict and be true to that, but then we can return back to our mind, our personality, our being, and have that influence what the house looks like, what wallpaper we choose, the countertops, the cabinetry, the furniture, everything to ornament and make it personalized to us. That is my natural intuition on what I think a resolution could be. And I think it stands true of what Jordan Peterson is talking about, that if we have too much order, it could be tyranny. And that's something I get dangerous about, that if we outsource too much, we're not even living our life. But if we don't outsource enough, we are living in chaos. And I think that is something that largely we struggle with. And like Jordan Peterson says, that is death. And so obviously we want to avoid. It's crazy that Jordan's used the word death, because Brian Johnson, his whole point was self-sabotage. Now it gives us the opportunities to self-reflect, to consider what governance system do we have in our lives? Do we use religion? Are we surrendering to some divine authority? Are you a stoic? Are you a romantic? And this is the last part that I want to go to of the governance design framework. Now that we've shed some light on the structure, the pillars that go into making our life, the house that we live in, theoretically, let's consult our own to reflect on what we're currently living in, the approach we're taking, but then to recalibrate. How could we do a little bit better of a job? And so these are the 4 aspects of governance that we can consider for ourselves, which I think is really cool. First, we have to determine authority. Who and what makes decisions in our life? Is that going to be us, or is that going to be data? Maybe it will be a combination of both. Next, you have to enforce constraints. If I'm simply going to data on this topic of my life, on physical health, that means I'm constraining my mind, I'm constraining my emotion to make any decisions in that category. I no longer have the opportunity, the ability to choose when I go to bed. Data has chosen that. And data says I go to bed at 9 p.m. And so that's an example of a literal constraint. Based off who is in authority, there are constraints by who is not in authority. Up next, you have measures of alignment. As you live your life and as you go through the system you have in working, how's it going? Are you succeeding? Are you failing? And how much? You can track this, and over time, you can adapt and modify the system to change and improve. And then the last thing to consider is purpose. What is your outcome? Brian Johnson's outcome, he said it very deliberately, was to not die. He wanted to exist. And so our system, our protocol, will be determined based on what our purpose is. Some people, you may just want to be happy. Maybe you want to be the best at something. Or maybe you want a balance of a few things. But this is such an important question because based on your purpose, it answers the rest of the three. If I want to simply exist, if that is my only main goal, that determines the authority in my life. Of course, it's going to be the data, it's going to be the algorithm. My mind is going to have no say. Like Brian Johnson said, I no longer have the ability to pick from a menu. He doesn't give himself that option. Because his purpose is to exist, his authority has changed. And so now that we've gone through those 4 aspects of governance, I want you to take some time to self-reflect on your current system that you have. Think to yourself, who designed the system you currently operate in? And what is it? Who's the authority? What's the purpose? What constraints are there? And how has it evolved throughout time? That's a really fascinating practice. I'm going to spend some time to do this. It won't be right now with you guys, but I really invite you to take some time to do this because, like I said, the purpose of this podcast and at the beginning is to get out of the weeds. We all have busy lives. We have work, we have relationships, we have stressors. If I gotta pay that bill, I gotta perform well at work. And very rarely do people consider the thought that everything in their life they signed up for. It's like, why are we stressed? You signed up for this. These are expected unknowns in our life. And so it's natural and it's easy to get into the routine of just living, but forgetting the fact that you literally created what you're living in. And so if there's an aspect of your life that you don't enjoy living, we have the full possibility to change that. And this practice is an opportunity to reflect on what change we could make, what change we want to make. It analyzes from an objective point of view what's going on. And then that's the most exciting part. Now that we know what's going on, okay, what can we do different? Based on the purpose I want, who should be the authority in my life? And based on who the authority is, what are the constraints that would serve my purpose? It's so exciting. Okay, now, after you have done this practice, going into part 2 and 3, let's design our governance system. Now that we have an idea of what currently dictates our life, who's in control, let's think about how we should change it if we want to improve our existence. The first item on the docket is sovereign. Who has the final say in moments of conflict? This goes back to the authority. Is it my future self, or is it your biomarkers, or your religion, your faith? Next up is doctrine. What law or principle rules all decisions? Then what constraints are there? What are you unwilling to negotiate with? And then you can create the feedback loop. After you have established the system, you can track. How is it serving you? How's it going? Is it working? And then what needs to be shifted? Ultimately, All of this is to serve our purpose, our telos. What is the system for? And I imagine that for most people, it will be a combination of things. And I think that means a little bit more work. That you have to isolate every little thing you want your purpose to be and then rate them. So I want happiness at 30%. I want my body at 40%. And so then you look at the daily actions. Okay, this has 40% prioritization. So my non-negotiables will be going to bed at 9 or whatever it is. But it's cool because based on your purpose, then you can really get to the nitty-gritty details of what you do day in and day out. It's unfortunate that this is a unique thought, and that's because we don't grow up this way. We grow up with systems of what's normal. And so right now we have to take the time to take a look back and consider what would be for our best. What I appreciate about Brian Johnson is his innovative thinking. That just because something is normal doesn't mean it's right. And I'm here to echo that saying because all of our lives are normal. We've normalized suffering. We've normalized pain. We've normalized stress. We've normalized unpaid bills or unfulfilling relationships, unhealthy bodies. It's crazy. But if you look around you, if you look at your life, everything you're not excited about, everything you're not proud of, everything you don't like being a part of, we've normalized it. And what Brian Johnson has done is he's rejecting that. He's saying, I don't care if it's normalized or not. I'm going after what's right, what's helpful. And that is the invitation I want to leave with you guys. To leave the normal behind and go for something that may be unique, it may be uncomfortable, it may take a different level of decision making to outsource it. But what would be most helpful for you? To live the best existence you possibly can. That is your reality check for this week. I appreciate you joining me. I'm excited to continue to have these conversations of various perspectives that various things and people can bring to the table, all things that we can learn from. The biggest way you can help me is by subscribing. Honestly, that is what will make this possible. The growth will snowball. My commitment to you is that I will practice, I will improve. I have a lot to improve in terms of my speaking capabilities, of how I present information, of the information I present to you guys. But it's my commitment that I will do the best I can. And as always, I'm here to take feedback. You guys are the audience. I love and appreciate you guys. So if there are ideas you want me to consider, feedback you have, please send it my way. And remember guys, be well, and I'll see you next time.